welcome to this month's edition of The Edge. I'm your host, Trevor Lewington, and you're watching on Jess FM and Jess TV. Remember, you can always watch Jess TV live on Roku TV, Fire TV, Apple TV, SSH 101 TV, or by going to www.jessfm.ca. We don't care how you got here, we're just really glad you could join us this evening. Each month, on the third Thursday of the month, we'll be talking to community and business leaders that are having a real impact here in Southern Alberta and beyond. Our guests are going to share their insights to help you gain an edge in building your community, build your life, and build your career. So we're very fortunate this month to have with us today Mike Warkentin, who's the CEO of Lethbridge and District Exhibition. Mike, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is great.
Brilliant. You're also my inaugural guest. This is our first broadcast, so thank you for being my guinea pig.
I appreciate that too. I think what better way to test this out?
So there's so much I want to unpack with you tonight. You've got this brand new $70 million plus 268,000 square foot facility that's just the crown jewel of Southern Alberta. We'll get to that. But I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your history. I think you've got some pretty deep roots here in Southern Alberta, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I don't know that everybody knows about me is that I actually grew up here. My family moved here in 1990. I lived on the west side, actually spent the majority of my life growing up here in Lethbridge. Went to the University of Lethbridge. I was joking today with some of our team that I should probably be recognized as a donor for the amount of time I spent at the U of L. But we'll talk.
Was a couple of extra semesters? Is that what you're saying?
We'll talk to them about that. And then I actually went away for grad school. Had the opportunity to go down to California. Always kind of knew I wanted to get into sports entertainment. The tourism piece kind of evolved, but came back to Canada, spent some time in Edmonton. But Lethbridge has always been home, and it felt good to come back a few years ago and obviously do something so meaningful for the Southern Alberta community.
Cool. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of your travels and, you talked about this grad school. What was that in, and what did you do in Edmonton? I guess I'm curious to what prepared you for this monster role you have today and kind of shepherding this legacy project in our community.
So I maybe I'll start by saying I don't know that anything prepares you for this type of project and the transformational change to such a legacy organization. That you kind of learn as you go. I went to San Diego State University almost immediately out of the U of L. I did spend a couple of years in the hybrid canola world in and around Southern Alberta, so I certainly got a feel for the agricultural industry in the area.
Literally getting your boots dirty.
100%.
Okay, good man.
For those that know what it is, I started roguing canola fields and ended up doing logistics for a company out of Coaldale, and then I had the tremendous opportunity and I got to go to San Diego State University, and so it was a phenomenal year, and everyone asked me what was living in San Diego like. It was exactly what you'd expect it to be like. It was phenomenal. It was
palm trees, beaches,
palm trees, world-class beaches, 75 degrees every day, walk to school every day. It really was a total change in lifestyle. Didn't have a car, which is obviously a change to how the majority of people kind of get around here in Southern Alberta.
Right.
It was a complete culture shock to what I had been used to growing up here, from climate to school to topic even. So I went straight from the agricultural field, kind of in the infancy of my career, to the world of professional sports. And so I took my MBA in professional sports, had the opportunity there to do a little bit of work with the San Diego Padres, with groups like Rip Curl, the surfwear company, a little bit with the Farmers Insurance Open PGA Golf Tournament, a few other large-scale sporting events in the San Diego area, and it really kind of shaped my large event expectation. San Diego is a big market. It doesn't really get credit for what it is because people look at San Diego Metro as the part that's in the United States, but really it's the metro area with Tijuana. So there is a lot of cross-border traffic on a day-to-day basis. It's a very multicultural city. And so it really changed kind of my outlook on the world, and outlook on how different cultures come together, and outlook on international influences on events and on the way people interact with event properties and facilities. And so there, that they obviously have the San Diego Convention Center. The big to do there every year is the original Comic-Con, Petco Park, where the San Diego Padres play. And then when I was there was the big debate over the old Qualcomm Stadium, where at the time the San Diego Chargers played, and now they've built the new Snapdragon Stadium as part of the SDSU Mission Valley campus. So really started to kind of shape my mentality about facilities and facility management, more on the sports side. I'll say I went there to be a sports agent because I really like Jerry Maguire. But it's interesting, you go with this mindset, and 90% of my classmates and 90% of the students that go to that program still want to be the general manager of a baseball team or a football team. And
it's sports management. It's like the big rock star sort of world is what they're in
and the
for.
glamour of the sports world. And
Okay.
the reality is, I don't think people realize when you enter an industry like that, you start at the absolute bottom rung.
Yeah, and it takes a very long time to progress through. Right?
Absolutely. And so I made my way to Edmonton, and it took me going to San Diego to make my way back to Alberta, and I'll unpack that a little bit for
Please.
you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So it was July. Our school year was a 1-year accelerated MBA program, so I was there from Martin Luther King Day in January to American Thanksgiving.
So
that
just
was our class
compressed all
time.
together.
Totally compressed,
Okay.
straight through. And then there was a 6-month practicum on the end. And in July of that year, I was coming back to Alberta for a friend of mine that I had grown up with. Here's bachelor party, wedding, flew into Edmonton, and I was actually with our program director, who has become a very good friend, two or three nights before I came back, and he said, hey, if you're going to Edmonton, you should really reach out to a gentleman named Richard Anderson.
Okay.
And he had previously had actually been an instructor in the San Diego State Sports MBA program. When he was the instructor, he was also the general manager of Petco Park. He was the original general manager of Petco Park. He had previously worked for the Atlanta Braves and multiple other sports properties on their facility side. And coincidentally, it was interesting because my friend Scott now, who's the program director, said, I'm not actually sure the organization he's working for, but he works for this group in Edmonton. You should connect with him while you're there. And so it was Canada Day morning, and I ended up having coffee with Richard Anderson in downtown Edmonton. Neither of us knew each other. We both showed up wearing Hockey Canada, Team Canada jerseys because it was Canada Day.
Support the team.
Support the flag. But we ended up having a great conversation about San Diego and about the opportunity. And by September of that year, he offered me an opportunity to come up and work with some of the professional sports properties that Northlands had as tenants in Edmonton. So he was the CEO of Northlands at the time, which is at the time was the one of the top 3, or maybe even the oldest ag society in the province of Alberta.
Which of course included the Coliseum at that time, home to the Oilers and all of
that
associated property.
So Edmonton Expo Center, which is a 522,000 foot trade and convention center.
Yeah.
Until very recently until early next spring will be the largest in Western Canada, and then the BMO Center in Calgary will take that over. We had Northlands Park, which was a horse racing track, thoroughbred track, casino, and then we had Rexall Place at the time, Northlands Coliseum. And so that's really where my interest lay, and so I had the opportunity as an intern in my practicum to actually oversee the National Lacrosse League team, the Edmonton Rush at the time, who have since moved on to Saskatoon. Kind of threw me in head first on facility management around a sports property. I had zero clue when I showed up on that first Sunday what the rules of lacrosse were.
Yeah.
Barely knew my way around the Coliseum, and just kind of learned as I went. And I want to say it was a 7-game season that they had. And I did my practicum. And one of the things I noticed while I was at Northlands was their forecasting of who was coming to events didn't it was just sort of standard. There'll be 3,000 people at this game and 5,000 people at this game because it's on a Saturday versus a Friday. There was no real scientific method to it. And so I had to write. It's not in our program. It's not a thesis, but similar to a thesis project that we had to defend at the end of the practicum.
Like a capstone paper.
Exactly
sort of big,
right.
Okay.
Exactly right. Capstone assignment. It's called our 795. We had to pair with a professor back at school, and I went with our statistical analysis professor, and we actually did a forecasting model to a predictive analytics model on how many people will come to sporting and entertainment events in Edmonton, depending on any number of factors. We all know that there's some wintry nights in Edmonton winters.
It's a balmy minus 40. That's a bit of a barrier.
Well, I'll tell you, moving from San Diego to Edmonton on American Thanksgiving is it's a bit of a
painful.
I talked about the culture shock going down.
Yeah.
Stopping in Salt Lake City to get a scraper for the U-Haul window was that was not part of the rental package, but
bit of an awareness moment
yes,
for like, what am I doing?
Exactly right. Like, okay, we're going back to Canada. This is
real.
This is real. Exactly right. So I had that tremendous opportunity, and actually towards the end of my practicum, which went January until May, we started planning the fair. And I had certainly never been around a fair before. I other than going up to Nashville North at the Calgary Stampede, or as a kid, or here at Whoop Up Days as a kid back when it was in July, and then after I moved to August. But as a patron, that's the only experience I had had with it, and so it was unique because I got to start to see some of the behind the scenes things, and one of the kind of key focus areas was on-site crowd control at entrances. And so some of the experience I had gained in California with some of those properties directly related. I will say I spent some time at Disneyland when I was in Southern California. You were resident, so there's a different
small
rate.
Discount.
That's right. And so got to kind of work with the inner workings of the fair, and then my practicum was ending at the end of May, so I only just got to get started. And they said, "Hey, would you like to stay on contract through the end of the fair," which was at the end of July. So I did that, and literally the day after the fair was over, I want to say it was an 80 to 90 hour week, and then pack up the apartment, move to my brother's place in Calgary, and then I think I slept for something like 16 hours
just
straight.
To recover, yeah.
Yeah, just straight recovery. And so that practicum really gave me the first feel for the industry from a sports perspective and managing a large tenant, and then also kind of getting my feet wet in the fair and really understanding how people interact with the fair, what drives people to the fair, what people spend their money on at the fair, how fairs actually make money, and how that gets invested back into the community. And so the unique thing about that time frame for me that I don't often share is at that time I had actually accepted a job in Manhattan to go work for a sports agency. Like the dream was coming true, and that's
the actual thing you went to school for and were hoping to get.
That's exactly right. And I was actually just in New York last month,
right?
And you realize just how different life would be if some things kind of happen to plan, and it's incredible how amazing your life can be if it doesn't go to plan, because what happened right at the start of October in 2013, and I don't know the specifics, but essentially the U.S. government shut down some of their departments, including the one that was responsible for my work visa. And so as a fresh graduate, corporations don't tend to wait around for visas to come in.
They weren't real excited to sponsor you and take on the risk with an unproven track record,
that's right.
That sort of thing. Okay.
Waiting, who knows how long before I can actually get into the country, right? But 2 days later, I was sitting in my brother's place in Calgary, filling out job applications and working on my resume. And actually, the folks from Northlands called and they said, "Hey, we've had some changes on our team. We'd love you to come oversee the Oilers property." And I thought, well, this is it.
Like, hello.
And so that was Thursday afternoon, and I think Sunday I was living in a hotel in downtown Edmonton at my first game, which was the second game of the season. And from there, kind of my portfolio grew. And so I went back as the venue manager for Rexall Place, had the Oilers as a client for 4 seasons, added in the Oil Kings, watched them win a Memorial Cup in 2014, had the lacrosse team until the building ended in 2017, and then the entertainment piece came in. And the majority of people you meet in the entertainment world push road cases and work their way up because of a love of music. And I always say I kind of fell backwards into entertainment and the convention center business because it's never what I intended to do. But it's such a fascinating thing how the skill set really relates, and the contractual management is all the same,
right,
regardless of the property. And so I'm rambling on, but kind of built my portfolio over 4 years. I to the director of sports and entertainment for Northlands, and then the Oilers built Rogers Place downtown, and that was kind of a call it the TSN turning point of my career, or maybe the first one. And so at that time, we were closing the venue. We did 1 year of Rexall Place after Rogers opened downtown.
Yeah, post Oilers Armageddon.
Yeah, we did kind of 5 to 10 major concerts. Eric Church came through, a few others. We did the final CFR, which was the 44th anniversary of CFR in Edmonton, which was a big emotional send-off for the building, which had been a palace of Canadian rodeo. We actually, the venue was inducted into the Canadian Rodeo Hall of Fame that year, so
wow.
it was a really cool send-off, which actually got me into rodeo, because I certainly never had owned cowboy boots before that time.
Now you have a collection.
I do have a collection now.
Good.
I'm very proud of it. And so it's strange how it evolves, and it all kind of layers on top of each other, almost like a Russian doll. You don't expect it, and then all of a sudden you're literally standing in bull manure in the back of the CFR, accepting a Hall of Fame induction for the venue. And so life is very unexpected. 2017 we closed that venue. 2018 I got married in early 2018 to a hometown girl from here in Lethbridge, and we didn't have the venues anymore. Northlands had gone through some organizational changes. The Expo Center had gone to, at the time, Economic Development, Edmonton Economic Development, which is now Explore Edmonton. And so we weren't a venue management organization, and so and I was married. We were literally commuting 5 hours back and forth up the highway, and so
that doesn't work.
It didn't make sense. Certainly wanted to be closer to the family, and found out about the opportunity for the Agrifood Hub and Trade Center. And at the time, it was 15 years or 14 years of conversation about the opportunity to redevelop.
Many feasibility studies, many blueprints, many community stakeholders building out this vision, right?
Years, and I know you played a large role in that. I think the original feasibilities go back to 2002, and I remember being in high school and hearing about changes coming to Lethbridge and District Exhibition, and so the opportunity to kind of bring some of that bigger market experience to really a world-class venue in Southern Alberta was appealing. Had the opportunity to come back, and then the world completely turned upside down on the tourism industry.
So, I mean, you say like you fell back into this role. We're glad you fell back into Lethbridge, by the way, and married your hometown girl. That's very important. But it's interesting to me, as you said, everything converges for a reason. Call it fate, call it karma, call it divine intervention, whatever appeals to you. But every one of your experiences seems to sort of bring you and point to this opportunity now in the organization you're leading today.
Yeah, and you asked before about what kind of prepares you to take this on, and I'm serious when I say I don't think anything truly prepares you for this. You think you're prepared, and then surprises come up around every corner. And certainly building something, anything of any size between 2020 and 2023, I don't think that's for the faint of heart. I think
it may not have been the optimal window ever for that sort of project.
It was an unprecedented window in the entire construction atmosphere.
Right.
And so it was, I think I aged about 35 years in the past 3, but to your earlier...
Well, you look good for 70, so if you can carry on.
Thank you. To your earlier point, Lethbridge truly has an asset that they can be exceptionally proud of. It's one of the, not just Lethbridge, Southern Alberta has an asset that they can truly be proud of. It's one of the, I'm exceptionally biased in saying this, but I think you'd agree. It's one of the best trade and convention centers in the country.
No question.
From a technical standpoint, I would say it's the most advanced trade and convention center in the country. Now that obviously changes over time,
Right.
But when it opened, it was certainly that way. We have tremendous partners from our funding partners with the Government of Alberta, the City of Lethbridge, our board and their commitment to the vision, Lethbridge County, the Prairies Can, and the list goes on and on and on of partners who see the vision and the opportunity for Lethbridge to really showcase what it has. Because I think you and I sit here because we live it every day and we say there's truly something special here now, but I think the real advantage that exists in Southern Alberta is the opportunity into the future.
So yeah, let's dig into that a little bit. You've talked about this. I truly think the Trade and Convention Center, the Agrifood Hub, is an anchor for the whole region. It is like a capstone and a magnet, if you will. We can attract the world here. We've got a building to showcase Southern Alberta to the world. We can host these amazing events and everything from Glow coming, which is a very unique Christmas sort of event, to I think it was it not Rumble in the Cage just last week as well?
We had Rumble in the Cage last week. 2 days before that, we had the Livestock Expo. We've had 4 powwows. Glow is coming in about a month's time, and some of these things that we've seen in other markets, or we've seen Southern Albertans travel to other markets to experience, like Glow. We now have a place that
we do it here.
That we can do that here, and we don't necessarily have to. People will travel here to see those things,
right.
And that's the real advantage, I guess, in the immediate forefront, that we say, yeah, we can do so much more now. When you think of Lethbridge, you think now we can say we're in the same markets as Halifax and Victoria and some of these mid-sized cities across the country that have large tourism spectrums that go to them. Lethbridge is right there now. We have those same assets because the Agrifood Hub and Trade Center is certainly the piece, and I would, to your point, I think it's a catalyst piece from a meetings and convention standpoint. And then when you layer in all of the tourism assets that we already have here in the Lethbridge area in Southern Alberta, it's truly a dynamic ecosystem. And then adding in sort of the economic benefits of the agricultural industry compared to other regions around the country. And you've heard me say this, and some people may have heard me say this before. There isn't another region like the Southern Alberta region for agricultural opportunity, I would say, in North America.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard me use the phrase total world domination, and I only say that half jokingly because I do believe Southern Alberta can feed the world. We have an obligation to feed a growing global population that's hungry. And I think, again, this is a world-class, world-leading facility and venue that we now have. So, I mean, I certainly have a vision for total world domination in our exports and attracting students and growing our population. But what's your vision for the facility? How does this venue evolve? What do you see in sort of the near and medium term for how's it going to be used? How does it fit into this region?
Yeah, so I'm going to take this 2 ways, and first I'll talk about the opportunity that exists in the venue itself. Okay. And then second, I will chat about what the venue means for the part of the city and the kind of the greater economy.
And I'm curious about that because Lethbridge County invested $2 million in a venue that they don't control and isn't in their jurisdiction. So I think there's a big, people get the big picture.
Yes.
But we'll come to that.
And that's an interesting point. So let's definitely come back to that one.
Okay.
I think first, it allows us to completely change how we as an organization and as a community actually approach bringing events and sort of business travel to Lethbridge. Okay. And so we have a lot of fantastic hotels in Southern Alberta, and so there already is an economy of business travel that comes in here. And pre-COVID, we had some of, you'll know this better than me, but I think we had some of the highest occupancy rates in the province next to the national parks, or the mountain parks, excuse me. And so how do we build upon that piece? And so what this facility allows us to do is Lethbridge and District Exhibition, going back to 1912 when they first kind of brought in the World Dry Farming Congress, has always been really strong on showcasing agriculture. And as more ag societies and as more tourism assets have grown around the country, we've become very regionalized, as have a lot of ag societies. There's over 200 of us in the province, let alone in the country. And so we've become very regionalized, but I think with the opportunity that we have, and this significant opportunity that we have, is for 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and it will come much sooner, and we've started the work on it already, is the provincial business. Bringing those provincial associations who have significant presence here from an actual producer or processing standpoint, but bringing that agritourism business to Southern Alberta, because we didn't have that house for it before. The same thing with the national audience, is how do we get Lethbridge on the map? It is, we said before, it's a top 15 venue. Well, how do we get it as a top 15 destination? And so getting our name out there as a place that people can actually come. Everyone knows this region in the ag world as an actual production region, but it hasn't traditionally been the place to come have the major
have the event and actually just be here.
The major conventions, or for a group like Richardson or the Irving Group, Cavendish Farms, to actually come and host their AGM or something like that in the region.
Gotcha, okay.
And so we have that opportunity now. And then I think the really unique thing that we look forward to in the future is starting to layer in the international traveler. And so we've worked very closely with Travel Alberta to align our growth strategy with theirs. And they have some very ambitious goals to double tourism receipts in the province by 2035, I believe.
No small accomplishment if we can get there, right?
There is that's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of investment and a lot of outside investment to do. And I think our asset positions us well as a region to play a significant role in that. And we will begin to layer in over the coming years international buyer programs into some of our events like Ag Expo and some of the events that we're looking to grow. We've just started the Agrifood and Innovation Expo in partnership with Red Deer and Western Park to showcase the agriculture value added sector. So that one will rotate between Red Deer and Lethbridge annually.
Red Deer this year, Lethbridge next year.
Correct, yeah. Okay. We'll get our inaugural one in 2024, but next month actually is the first one in Red Deer, and that's meant to have an international investment component too.
Okay.
So Eastern Canada has a lot of food value add shows. We're trying to showcase what Western Canada has, because I think you and I, as I said before, you and I live it every day, and we know the value and more importantly the opportunity that we have here. And I think it's still a little bit of a hidden gem to a lot of the world. And it's interesting when people come to see our venue, it amazes them what we actually have as an asset here, and I'm sure you see the same thing from a greater economic perspective. And so that's the opportunity that the venue kind of gives us from an event perspective. I talk a lot about agriculture. We're an ag society, so it's our mandate to showcase.
That's the core function.
It's certainly our mandate to showcase the agricultural industry, and it's certainly our greatest economic piece here. But it is a center capable of hosting any type of event, as you mentioned, Glow and Rumble in the Cage, and really any type of event that we have a truly modern, world-class venue here that I would put up against any facility in the country.
And I think it's less of a hidden gem now. I think I remember you saying it was something like 100,000 people went through the building in the first 4 weeks, which to me underscores how interested people are, how significant this project could be, if that's truly the initial, if that was a correct number.
Yeah, and so we did track that number. That is a real number. Off the top of my head, I don't have the exact down to the person. But I'm even going to caveat that first 4 weeks that there was probably a 10-day period from when we did our grand opening to when we actually cracked the doors open on Whoop Up Days, where we shut that down for the most part, and we're kind of heavy into construction mode. We did our grand opening weekend, we went back into construction mode hard for about 10 days to get ready for Whoop Up Days, and then we opened up for Whoop Up Days, which was record setting, and we had over 77,000 people through the venue, through the site.
That's so great.
And so, like, the opportunity from kind of the traditional thought of what a convention center can do, I think is identified through the properties that can come in it and the economic spin-off that happens in the community. And I think the other side, I mentioned I was going to say two sides. The other side is, what can that mean? What can the asset or what can the site mean as a catalyst for further development of the community? And I think there's examples around the country, of districts. We often refer to Lansdowne Park in Ottawa,
Which has become an entertainment, mixed-use, commercial housing. It's actually almost an entire neighborhood built around the facility, right?
Absolutely. And so that one obviously is around a football stadium, and there are some old traditional ag buildings on there. That's actually the old 140 or so year old Ag Society grounds. And they've done a really good job of creating additional tax revenue for the community, commercial development. They've seen a high absorption rate within that commercial development. And so I think the opportunity that we see is, how are we not just a parking lot for 250 days a year,
Right.
When there's still events going on, but they're not the larger ones that are taking outside space or totally filling the parking lot. So how do we reimagine the entire 72 acres of the site to support the greater need and the greater growth of Lethbridge and Southern Alberta? And I think that when you talk about the county and investing, they capture that vision of what can this mean for the entire region in terms of investment. And so we've got, as I say, 72 acres of prime land that sits between a provincial highway that's kind of the gateway to the county, to the United States, up to the major centers in Calgary and Edmonton, and the most beautiful urban setting that we have in Southern Alberta, Henderson Lake on the other side. And so there's very few.
It's a heck of a view.
there's very few, if any, sites in an urban setting like that are developable, and we need to become more active in how we start to tell that story about reshaping that neighborhood, so we're not an island of a convention center as we've been for 25 years or so.
Right. Now, I mean, you talked about the number of partners you have, including Lethbridge County and their financial contribution. I mean, this building is estimated to have an annual impact of, I think, $90 million was sort of the...
Yeah.
I wouldn't be doing my job as an economic developer if we didn't talk about that a little bit. So I mean, I think as a taxpayer, I'm like, wait a second, governments of all kinds spent $70+ million building this thing, but there's a payback potentially of $90 million in the economy every year, forever and ever. Like, can you talk a little bit about how you see that working and what some of those spin-offs are?
Absolutely. And so that number is the estimate based off our original forecasting for what this building could be. And so I will say I believe that to be conservative. I think the opportunity in this facility and in this part of the country is significantly higher than what even we as Southern Albertans believe it to be today. And so we do anticipate 90 million, and I think people forget when they talk about the fair, they talk about an event coming in with international visitors. They don't necessarily think about the hotel rooms. They don't think about the restaurants that are filled. They don't think about the shops downtown that people go shop at because or the families come along and need something to do.
Or the side trip to Waterton, or whatever that may be.
Or writing on stone, you name it. All the birds of prey, like all these aspects that people do. And I know when you travel quite a bit for work, I'm sure you're not just in the conference room for the entire 2.5 days. You go out and explore. And so the business traveler is there's a lot of statistics on this. The business traveler is way more likely than any kind of traveler to spend significant amount of money in the destination that they're going to. And I think that's the real opportunity, is off our campus. Where is that money going into our economy? And that's how we showcase the tremendous communities that we have here in Southern Alberta. And we start to, you know this number better than me, but I remember hearing something like the majority of people who move to a destination traveled there for either business
Right.
or vacation and realized how great a
That
place
was
it
their
was.
realistic preview. Yeah.
Right. And so I think when we talk about that being a conservative member, or when I do, I truly believe that this is a phenomenal place to live. And people coming into this community will start to see that, and we'll see further investment, and we'll see the population and the commercial growth both in Lethbridge County and in Lethbridge proper. And I think when you talk about the investment from the county, an investment outside the county, I think that's the real opportunity that they saw.
Right.
And I think from a taxpayer perspective, I think we get feedback sometimes that the lines were too long for the zipper, or there wasn't a parking spot.
Which, if that's the worst complaint, I think that's you're probably doing all right.
We're doing okay. You're
Yeah.
right. You're absolutely right. But it's and we actually like that feedback, because it is about our guest experience, but it's also how do we change the entire conversation about what an ag society can be for a region, and help support organizations like Economic Development Lethbridge or Southgo,
Right.
or to help drive investment, because I really think that's the piece that we offer: fill hotel rooms, fill restaurants, etc.
Right. Now, I mean, we're rapidly running out of time here, and I think I could have you back for multiple shows, because there's just so much to talk about. But I do want to, just to dig a little bit into the fact that you were recognized with an Indigenous name,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you've, in particular, made it a priority to have, Blackfoot wayfinding in the building.
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about that journey. And to me, that's sort of this recognition of, we want this to be a place where people want to live, but you're trying to make it a place where everybody wants to live. So maybe can you talk a little bit about how you got that name, and what it is and what it means and how that came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been very, very fortunate. Obviously, been honored with a Blackfoot name last year. I was given an eagle feather this year, and I'll take you back to, I want to say 2020.
Okay.
Maybe 2019. I think it was during COVID, though. I remember having a conversation with our board about kind of what do we want to be when we grow up as an organization. And the board at the time was doing a lot of work. We were evolving as an organization, obviously. The project had been funded. We were about to start construction. We started in the spring of 21. And so not only was that a physical change to our organization, but there was a lot of how do we evolve our organization to meet the demands of a brand new trade and convention center, which is a much different kind of business model than what our organization had been
Right.
known for or actually practiced. And so one of the things that came up was this conversation about the Indigenous community. And obviously we live in a place that has the tremendous benefit of having some of the largest Indigenous communities in the country around us. And one of the things I say often is it's not about Lethbridge being next to the largest Indigenous nation in the country. It's about southern Alberta having the largest Indigenous population in our community. It's not next to, it's one community. And so as our conversations went with our board, there was a lot of excitement around how do we engage the Indigenous community in a different way. And I will say there was a lot of humbling to that.
I'm sure.
There was a lot of conversations that were certainly humbling. We're a 126-year-old organization a couple weeks ago.
There's some history there.
We're older than the city of Lethbridge itself. And so Indigenous people of Southern Alberta, Blackfoot people, have had a significant impact on us as an organization. And in turn. And so we had to kind of hear the challenges that we've had between our organization and the Indigenous community over the years. And that's why I say it was humbling. I think for me in particular and our board, a lot of that was tough to hear, but it's the reality. And I think if a lot of organizations that have been around as long as ours, it would be a very similar experience to go through.
Right.
And so we started at a place of listening, which really built a culture of trust. From there, we built an advisory council, which includes elders, which includes members of council off the nations. We are moving forward with signing an MOU with the Blackfoot Confederacy next month, which has been a few years in the works with all 4 Blackfoot nations.
So the Confederacy being the broader umbrella.
Correct. So
Right.
it's 4 Blackfoot nations. 3 here in Canada and 1 in Montana. So
Right.
it is a cross-border organization. And every month we work to strengthen that relationship, whether that's through including Indigenous programming in our events. And our MOU actually speaks to it. It has 3 pillars. It has sort of a placemaking, and you mentioned the wayfinding in our building, and how do we make it an inclusive space for the Indigenous community and for the non-Indigenous community to come together and celebrate all of their cultures in one place. The second pillar is programming, and I think that's the one that comes most natural to our organization. We put on events, we bring events in.
Yeah.
So that was a natural fit, and I think when people think about our relationship with Blackfoot people, that's the one, right? Like that, everyone goes, okay, it makes sense. There's a powwow. There's traditionally been elements of Indigenous culture. We introduced the Warrior Relay at the Lethbridge and District Rodeo, which has been the biggest crowd favorite.
It's pretty wild.
Of
I
everything.
get that.
And it certainly exists at the Calgary Stampede and some other places, but there's a different element here because you are right up close and personal with that. And if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to come out next year.
Yeah, the mud on your face as the horses go by, right? It's
and the wipeouts in the rain, and it is a wild sport to watch. And then the third pillar, and probably the one that is toughest to talk about, but maybe the most important to the MOU is the kind of the protocol pillar. And so it was very coincidental that it worked out to 3 Ps. But the protocol pillar, there's some of the elements that you see a lot of organizations doing, and it's incredibly important as a piece of truth and reconciliation in some of the land acknowledgements and some of those things that we certainly have, and we're certainly thankful for as an organization. But one thing we wrote specifically into the wording was that we want to be an organization and a leader that is battling systemic racism with Indigenous people in Southern Alberta. And so, as I say, tough to talk about,
Yep.
but so critically important to growing this community and growing this region. And so from there, we've created a really strong bond and friendships with a lot of the people that were originally advisors to us, but now
They're part of the Ag Society family. They're embedded in your organization.
We've been invited to weddings. We've been invited
Wow.
to ceremonies at people's homes. And so I'm very humbled and honored to get a name, but it's such a small piece of the importance of what we're doing with the Indigenous community.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's not a one-time thing. It's literally embedded in everything that your organization is doing, and you see it as a long-term process, which I think is powerful.
100%. And I think there's a lot as an organization. I think as just Southern Albertans that we have to learn and we have to understand, and we have a long way to go. We've taken steps to be better, but it's not something that we're ever going to be able to check a box and say, well, we've done that, because that's not what this is about. This is about a process of understanding and inclusion, and it's always something that will evolve and continue to evolve. But to your point, it's something that comes into our day to day.
No, very powerful. So, final thoughts. We've got just a couple of minutes left. As you think about your journey down to the warmer tropical climate of San Diego, working with Oilers Entertainment Group, Northlands, sort of that experience, the design, project management, construction of this amazing anchor in Canada's premier food corridor and supporting the region. Part of this show's called The Edge. So what would be the one lesson or the one sort of piece of advice you would give to people as they're thinking about their career or big projects? Like, what's your one key learning that you would want to share with the world? What's Mike's best wisdom?
Yeah.
No pressure whatsoever.
Exactly. To be honest with you, I think it's very cliche, and a friend of mine from Edmonton wrote a book called The Bold Ones, but it is about being bold and not being afraid to make decisions. I think that decisiveness is the number one business tool that I wish I could impart on everyone. It's something that everyone kind of does in their own ways, but it's something that differentiates people so quickly, and that I don't want to say risk-taking, but ability to make a decision and move in that direction has been my key to success and my key as I grow teams. It's the number one skill I look for as well.
Okay. So big picture, compelling vision, decisive action, just do due diligence, be careful, but just go after it.
Exactly right. And it's not just big picture. I think that boldness, like, yes, it certainly applies to big picture and going after visions, but the ability to make decisions on where to set tables up to, hey, this is the approach we need to take to finance a $77 million building. All of those things take a level of boldness, and I think the people that I see that are most successful around me, and I'm sure you'd agree, are the people that are willing to be bold and take that action.
No, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining The Edge. My guest, Mike Warkentin, every third Thursday here on Jess FM and Jess TV. Thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you on November the 16th.